Welcome to Living Chassidus. Together, let's live the Chassidus we learn. Okay, so we have the great source of having Rabbi Kaplan here today. Tonight is Or La Tes Kislev, and we are celebrating and Farbrengen in honor of the Mitterler Rabbe. I actually love the Mitterler Rabbe. It was my favorite Rabbe of all time. So in the history, Baruch Hashem. So I'm very glad and happy to have Rabbi Kaplan. Rabbi Kaplan, I know you do a lot of amazing things, JLI and teach and Farbrengen. Do you mind giving us a short? I don't always keep up with all your accomplishments at every stage.
No, presently, anyway, good Yom Tov, everybody. I'll get back to that in a second. Thank you for inviting me. Somebody here was my student once, no?
I was.
You were?
A long.
Yeah, some moons ago.
I think she remembers the thing that you're doing.
So I want to apologize for not having my kapata on, because every Friday we start off the day without a kapata and we end it with a kapata. So I could have transitioned, and it was my intention, and the day definitely demands it. So yeah, right now life is simple. Just for myself, my name is Rabbi Kaplan, and I grew up on Shlichus in Seattle, Washington. I came to learn in Crown Heights. I came to Yeshiva in 1987, and I've basically been here since, besides 1 year that I was in Eretz Yisrael. We were sent on Shlichus. And my current occupation is I'm the principal of the Chabad Elementary School in Monsey, New York. I'm also involved with a shul here in Crown Heights. So if anyone's still looking for, you have a Shabbos shul here? Anyway. Oh, yeah. And if that's why I say, if anyone's still looking. Anyway, you can get the details later. It's a big schus. So, yeah, so the Mitterler Rabbe, just a moment here. Everyone here is a full-time student. You work, and you have evening classes.
This is our evening class.
Once a week? Twice a week? And okay, wonderful. So you make time to be connected in a revealed way. We're all connected. Bipnimius. So that's amazing. So everyone here is making a keli, and Hashem should fill the keli with blessing, with all the brachas that you're looking for. Yeah. So I'll start off with a little story, and then we could Farbrengen a little bit. So the Mitterler Rabbe married somebody who lived in Vitebsk, which is not far from Lubavitch. It's all in the same region. Liozne, I mean, they're all not too far from each other. And just as a side note, when you read the story of the arrest of the Mitterler Rabbe, so it describes how they traveled, to the main city. So where they passed through on the way from Lubavitch. So he would go visit his in-laws, like happens sometimes you go visit your in-laws. So the Mitterler Rabbe was already appointed by the Alter Rebbe to work with younger light, to be mekad of them to Chassidus and Darkei Chasidim, to see to it that Chassidus should have an impact on their life. And the Mitterler Rebbe went to his in-laws, And there was a younger man there. So he tried his trade on this younger man. He started nudging him. He should learn more chassidus, and that he should, in Yiddish you say, et gedaft oizen anders. He should look differently, more edel. And this person, this chassid, he looked at the Mitterler Rabbe and he's like, what are you sitting here lecturing me about being more chassidish? We can't compare. You're a younger man, I'm a younger man. You know what I do for a profession? You know my job. Says the peasants, when it comes the time of sowing the fields, they don't have enough seeds. Like they don't plan it well. So I sell seeds to the peasants, and then we make up, after the harvest, I go collect the seeds with profits. So when I go, when the season comes, when I go to collect my grain, so first of all, I have to go very early in the morning, because later in the day, people leave their houses. You can't get anything. No one's home. Like you come to the house, they're missing. So I leave the house 3:30, 4 a.m. and I come to the peasant's home, and I want them to feel good about everything. So we say a little l'chaim, and he says sometimes when we're sitting there schmoozing, his wife will come in. I don't want her to ruin the business, so I give her l'chaim, and and then we all have a drink. And then he says sometimes we dance a little, everybody together. And he says, I make a couple of rounds. By the time it's 9 o'clock in the morning, he says, I'm half drunk. And he already danced with a couple of couples of the Russian peasants. And now he's going to daven. What do you expect? What's the davening going to look like? He says, your father is the Alter Rebbe. And you're sitting in Lubavitch surrounded by Chassidim. And your whole life is Chassidus. So, how do you what are you talking to me about being more Chassidish? The Mitterler Rebbe was very, very taken by what this person said, meaning when he spoke to him, he had no context, he had no idea. It's like he felt that this person was a real Keli, and he saw that he's learning Chassidus, and he was trying to push him. Then when he realized where he comes from, he was amazed, like that he has this edelkeit, that he's refined to this degree. And then he looked back at himself. He's like, how could I compare? And it really, really bothered him. And when he came back to Lubavitch, the Alter Rebbe noticed that there was a change in his son. And he spoke to him about it. And the Mitterler Rebbe obviously told his father the whole exchange and how he felt about it. And the Alter Rebbe encouraged him. And later, when that younger man from Vitebsk came to the Alter Rebbe, came to Liozna, and he went into Yechidus, the Alter Rebbe said to him, I want to thank you for making a mensch out of my son. Right? That he had such an impact on the Mitterler Rebbe. So, there's a certain oddity with sitting at such a Farbrengen. It's like, I'm just giving a drosha. So I want to say a few things. First of all, I can't answer all your questions. Like this, the Farbrengen is about the Mitterler Rebbe. If we have questions about, all kinds of theological questions or whatever, like it's beyond the pale. But if any, some questions are always a good thing. The other thing is that sometimes I'll say a hergish, and it's not Torah Misinai. It doesn't have to be true. It's in other words, it doesn't have to line up with every planet. It's just a thought. So I want to share a thought that maybe we could each take to ourselves, and maybe it's a little bit, I'm being a little presumptuous and making some big statements, but the Mitterler Rebbe's Hasidim were known to be dedicated to avodas hamayach, to meditation. They were very serious about learning Hasidus, and they all practiced meditation. When I say all, in other words, that was the koch of the time. Hasidim of the time were very into his beinunus. The Mitterler Rebbe's tkufa, even though the Mitterler Rebbe was arrested, but the emes, the tkufa of the Mitterler Rebbe was a calm period on the side of Russia and Ukraine. The gzeiros began with the Tzemach Tzedek. The gzeira of the Cantonists began during the lifetime of the Tzemach Tzedek. Everyone knows, right? Everyone knows the Cantonists, right? You're all familiar, right? So, and that the havoc, the pain, the challenge that it brought to have kids taken away from their families. Not only that, but to have Jews kidnapping children so they could replace the children of the rich kids. It was a really terrible, terrible time, and it lasted. So basically, every town had to give a quota, right? There was a number of kids. So there were people, to make money, they would kidnap children of poor of families, and then when they would come and ask for the quota, they would come to the rich families who had kids, and they would say, "Look, we have kids in captivity. We'll give them, instead of your children, give us money." The way I'm presenting it, that's one way. There were different ways that it took place, but this, in different forms, this happened. So, I'm not, I'm just to think about it. The Eibishter provided the Hasidim of the Mitterler Rebbe with a certain space that would allow for meditation. It wasn't abundance of Gashmias, but they didn't have the tzoros that came afterwards. And on the Hisnagdus end, they didn't deal with what they dealt with in the time of the Alter Rebbe. So the Hasidim of the Mitterler Rebbe were in a time that allowed them to really be involved in learning and meditation. Okay, and then I don't know which one came first. Maybe they stopped being mizbainin, and then the Eibishter brought Gzeiros. Again, we in 2024, at the tail end of 2024, we live in a time when there's a tremendous emphasis. I'm not talking now about what's going on in Eretz Yisrael. That's another discussion. Maybe we'll get to part of it. But we're living in a time where the discussion among young people, parents, mechanechim, the emphasis in the world is about, and it's not today, it's already for, maybe a decade, there's this emphasis on providing people with a safe space. And I'm not saying this in a dismissive way. Some people don't even understand what safety means in this sense. But there's a tremendous, it's not about improving the curriculum. It's not about what's the program. It's about, are the students going to be comfortable? Can they learn? Or they feel threatened? There's something looming that doesn't allow them to focus, whether it's bullying or whatever issues might come up in an environment where someone is trying to concentrate. So there's a tremendous emphasis on understanding and providing people with a space that's conducive to learning. To me, from a Hasidus perspective, the tachlis of all of that is one tachlis, is to lead to his beinunus. Meaning, in the tkufa that we're in, where we don't sit every Shabbos by Farbrengen with the Rebbe, and the messages of Chassidus can only reach us by us learning on our own. You know, when the Rebbe says something, the impact of the Rebbe saying something is very profound. No mashpia, magid shir, no one that comes to learn with you is going to say anything that's going to, sear itself into your neshama. It's not like they're going to say a mimer and it's going to have such an impact. It's possible that you will be impacted, but we understand that when the Rebbe says something, it's so much more impactful. You know, there's a famous, when Hasidim talk about the early generation of Hasidim, Rabbi Isaac Homler, when he came out of the first Yechidus, he waited 15 months before he went into Yechidus again. He said, the Alter Rebbe gave me work. In order to implement what the Alter Rebbe told me, I needed 15 months of consistent work in order to implement all those, the expectation. And there were many other examples of such a model where they would hear a message and then the Hasidim would say, wow, how long will it take for me to make that part of my life? So for us today, in the spirit of the Mitterler Rabbe, there's something that we have that's a parallel. In Gashmias, materially, we're not struggling the way people were struggling, 2 generations ago. We don't have to talk about too many stories. My grandfather, through marriage, would talk about how the worst way to pass away is through hunger. And he survived hunger, but he came close. He said, why? He says, because, when a person knows that their end is near, they want to think about ruchnius, cheshbon hanefesh. They want to think about meaning. When you're hungry, you only think about bread. That's it. You become reduced. And that was the experience of many people. So we have, a certain amount of menucha. Of course, people struggle financially. That's not the discussion. But we're in a whole different space. And mostly the emphasis, the training, the reteaching, working on cultural and social norms, right? What's normal? What do we have to work on? What do we normalize? Is it normal that a kid should have to be afraid of someone sitting next to him in a school? Or is it normal that while you're sitting in a classroom, if you raise your hand to ask a question, or if you're in a shir, you're going to raise your hand to ask a question and someone's going to react dismissively, and you're going to say, you know what, I'm uncomfortable asking a question. So all of this is here to give us the opportunity to be mizbainin. Yeah.
Is there anything you can provide to actually be mizbainin in a very simple way?
Right. And as a way to be mizbainin?
Something mizbainin about, but like, I don't know,
Right. So what I would suggest is to find in davening something that you're comfortable with, like a part of davening that you feel comfortable with, then to learn a little bit about it, and to be mizbainin in that inyan. So yeah, so you have a base in the text, you have a spot in the text, and you also feel like it's something that you chose. So you have like a libe chafetz aspect to, the Mitterler Rabbe. One of the svarim of the Mitterler Rabbe is a Pirush Hamilos, and he literally goes through pasuk by pasuk of davening, and just gives a biur, like in Hoidu, pasuk by pasuk, Yehi Chavoid, in Ashrei, just of course Shema, but yeah, like you're saying, 5 minutes. What does it mean? What's the meaning of B'chol Levavcha? It's not about, first of all, many of us were raised with this idea that like there's a way to do his baininus, like there's a kind of magic, and so we're all like lost in like, how do you find this place? But really, first of all, there's no wrong way. Like if we make the space and we have a thought and we work through an idea, that's it. Even just to say this in I'll say it, let's say, on the pasuk Va'ata Tetzava, right? Va'ata Tetzava of the Maimer, the last Maimer that the Rebbe gave out. So if you think about just the word, you say Va'ata, right? So it's a reference of the entire person. And there's a vav, it's a continuation of something, there's a context. And Hashem is talking to Moshe, but he wants to talk to him more deeply. And then he says Tetzave. Usually in Torah it's Tzav. Hashem, like you're gonna, just, in other words, just every word, like even Ashrei. So you think about just the word Ashrei, and yet just every word, just to unpack the meaning of every word. In what way are the Yoshvei Veisecha fortunate? And what does it mean to be settled in the house of Hashem? And so on. Like any part, any...
Is there like a safer you would recommend that's like simple?
So even though it's in Hebrew, the books by Rabbi Kaplan are fantastic. To learn how to daven, Lilmoid Eich Le'espalel, 4 volumes. They're written so it's light, really, like it's not a mimer. In other words, the way it's set up, the sefer is that every section of davening has a few pages. There's a story about it, a halacha, an insight, a short insight, a little biur, and then the next piece. So it's written in a very, the Hebrew is easy, lefi arech, and yeah, sure, yeah. Lilmet Eich Le'espalel, yes, and it's based on Ma'amorim, and sometimes you read an entry, and at the end it says it's an Amaimer. You're like, really? It felt like an article, like it's such like, wow, I didn't think that was a Maimer. So that's just one, something to think about. That, or let me say it in a different way. For those of you who feel like your life you're stuck in the Mayim Rabbim, so what I said until now doesn't apply. But if you feel like Hashem provided you with some menucha in some way, then maybe that menucha could be used to create a space for some hizbaininus. And then, to me, this leads into a little bit, one part of the Mitterler Rebbe's life. The Mitterler Rebbe, so just to give a little, historically what happened. When the Alter Rebbe passed away, the machloikas with the misnagdim was tremendous. What happened was the Gra, Rabbi Eliyahu of Vilna, the Gra, passed away on Sukkot over about 10 years before the Alter Rebbe passed away, and he was older. When he passed away, the people who were looking to stir up the machloikas, they used it as an opportunity to generate and intensify the hate against Hasidim. It's like at his levaya, they had people pledge that they're going to fight the Hasidim. And someone came and said, oh, I think the Hasidim are celebrating the fact that he passed away. You know, like, it was terrible. And there was nothing to hold them back. And Hasidim really, really struggled. If you look a little bit at the writings, you know, what they said was that Hasidim don't have, there's no ownership. A Chassid doesn't own anything. Al pi din, you're allowed to walk into a store that belongs to a Chassid and take the whatever you want off the shelf and walk out. Right? Their money is hefker, whatever it is. So it was a very challenging time. And as we know, yeah, you know, because that's how there were people who had like what we call theological arguments that they didn't agree, right? Oh, you're not allowed to learn Kabbalah, whatever, right? Things like that Hasidim are doing things wrong. But then there were people who enjoyed the fight, who fueled the fight. When we look today, we have documents of what was going on in Vilna, and there were people who, you know, there were politicians, what we would call, that were just flaring up this machloikus. And ultimately, you know, we know what happened, that many Hasidim left and went to Eretz Yisrael just to avoid all the machloikus. The Alter Rebbe, even though the Alter Rebbe stayed in Russia, was very difficult, and obviously leading to the arrest. And after the Alter Rebbe was freed and he moved, so things improved a little, but it was still very difficult. The Mitterler Rabbe had a certain approach, like a very practical, down-to-earth approach that was very different. It was a shift from the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe wrote takonos. The Alter Rebbe wrote like bylaws of what it means to be a chassid. The bylaws of the Alter Rebbe were about the Hasidim themselves, how they should daven, how they should behave, what they should learn, like, you know, different expectations for their own lives, what kind of businesses to be involved with, all these different things. So what we call takonos liyozna. The Mitterler Rebbe, like, started from scratch. He had a whole new set of bylaws, and for him, one of his rules was that you're not allowed to enter into a shul to daven with a minyan. You're not allowed to enter a shul that's not a Chabad shul, because he didn't want machloikas, because he knew that every time they went into a shul, it ended up in a fight. So all the Hasidim built shuls. They made their own minyanim. So they became very strong where they were. Then he said even to listen to Kriyas HaTorah from behind the window, he doesn't allow, because people would know, and they would, then it becomes an issue. Then they close the window, and all these things that would happen. And then he said, and also absolutely forbidden to get involved in any debate. You're not allowed to argue. Nothing. You have to walk away. There's no debating anybody, no arguments. And then the Mitterler Rebbe said that any chassid who wants to come to hear Chassidus in Lubavitch, the condition is that on the way, every town that he passes through, He has to stop there and chazer a maimer. Okay, so you have all these people, looking to get to the next stop, trying to find customers to listen to them saying ma'amorim. And first of all, people started learning Hasidus, and they started chazering. Like it became this whole atmosphere of people learning and sharing and teaching was an unbelievable thing. So this style, which was completely new, the Hasidim, like the Alter Rebbe's Hasidim, didn't have this in their programming at all. And here the Mitterler Rabbe came about with this plan, and then of course the Mitterler Rebbe purchased land and he settled families there, which also really expanded the reach of Hasidim, because all the people who moved there considered themselves Hasidim, even though they were very simple and they didn't know Hasidus. I mean, the first generation was still connected, but down the road, their children, were real Yeshuvniks. They were really simple people. But these are things that the Mitterler Rebbe put into place, and the Eidah, the congregation, the kohol of Hasidim that knew Hasidus grew tremendously. And what happened? There became this, everyone has to compete, naturally. Like what happens next? Where does it lead? Everyone's learning Hasidus. What happens now? So people have to, show off. They have to find a way to make themselves bigger than the other person. So they started with this Hizbainanus shtick. Let's see who could be Mizbainin for longer. And then it became like this ridiculous thing, right? Imagine people that they don't go home. They just stay in shul, 18 hours, Yeah. And so then there began this new thing that if you're in a truly, if this is really transcendental meditation, I'm sorry for using that language, there won't be any, it won't be, you won't be able to tell, you won't be able to see anything on the outside. You'll be completely still. There's no swaying. Swaying is bluff. You're a chitzin. Like you have to be completely, if a chassid is going to start singing a melody, they're like, you got to throw him out of shul for being a faker. And they were taking this very seriously. And someone repeated to the Mitterler Rebbe that Hasidim were sitting together, and to use contemporary language, someone was roasting another Hasid for snapping his finger during davening. The Mitterler Rebbe heard this. He was very, very upset, and he wrote a sefer. He wrote a booklet, a kuntris hahispilus. And the Mitterler Rebbe writes, he says, I don't understand. The whole purpose of learning Hasidus, the whole purpose of meditation is v'hashevaisa elavavecha. The whole point is that we should be moved. The emotional part, that's the goal. How does this become suddenly like the antithesis of how did this happen? How did we end up here? And the Mitterler Rebbe really turned this whole, counterculture of like this whole shtick, because that's what happens. People need guidance, and then they get very involved in one thing. They go off too far. So the Mitterler Rebbe brought them back. And for us, this idea, yes, this is, we're in a space that's a learning space. Like this is where we learn. And in today's day and age, the emphasis on content is tremendous. Like everybody, we want information. We live in the information age. And the idea of what happens with the way we feel, how does it reach us? Where does what we learn, How moved are we by what we learn? And by the Mitterler Rabbe, that was the key. I'll mention this over a background. You know, the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya, in Perek Lamed Zayin, he says, our avodah in the world is la'asoisei. La'asoisei is the most important thing because this is where Klippa is, and the novelty of forcing Klippa to serve Hashem, that's why we're here. That's iskafia. That's ishapcha. That your body, you know, your guf, your nefesh abam is saying amen and doing a mitzvah and so on. So that's in the la'asoisei. So the Alter Rebbe says, first, there's the object. You take a physical object, you know, you take a lulav, you take a piece of food, you take a physical object, which the chayes is from Klippas Noiga, you don't see a lekus in it, and you make it, this becomes a mitzvah. That's iskafia. That's transformation. You just took something that was klippa, you made it kedusha. So first there's the chayfetz. Then the Alter Rebbe says, there's your body. There's your nefesh habahamis. You're transforming that to kedusha. Then he says, well, what happens when you do a mitzvah that's more spiritual? Like davening. It's not really physical labor. You know, it's davening or learning. It's only dibur. So he says, well, dibur is also a maisa because you're moving your lips. Yeah, but you know, we would call that maisa zuta. It's like a tiny maisa. So the Alter Rebbe suddenly says, you know, that's why we find that when you daven, you should daven kolatz moisai toimarno. Like it didn't occur to anyone to say, wait a second, bones don't speak. What do you mean? Kolatz moisai toimarno. My bones are going to say Hashem micha moicha. Right? But what the Alter Rebbe is saying is that b'chol koichoi, try to daven. Yeah, it's only dibur. You know, you have the mitzvahs, tefillah, kriya shema, birchas hamazon, birchas hanenin. They're just you know, auditory mitzvahs. But try to do it with your whole body. Try to, you know, swaying, saying it with all your koyach. The Mitterler Rabbe, you know, there's the story that in the stillness, his meditation was so intense that from the edge of his hat, sweat was dripping. You know, so by the Mitterler Rabbe, the Kol Atzmais, I didn't need to be dancing or swaying. But it was so felt. It wasn't cold. It wasn't, you know, like there's the Hayom Yom, that the mind is a cold place. That the whole point is warmth. And that's also something that's incredibly important in our times, when everything becomes, I don't want to get into this, you know, I don't know anybody here, to get into a discussion about moral relativism is beyond the scope of our discussion. But the point is that there's this atmosphere, there's a culture, there's a society that says that really all knowledge and all information, like, don't take it so seriously. It's only true in your little enclave. You know, somewhere down the road, what's important to you is meaningless to someone else. So really, it's all relative. So don't take the information so seriously. Like, that's, in a certain way, just the fact that we live here, that we're part of this culture, it affects us. Everything is just, another idea. I was once at a bar mitzvah here in Crown Heights. Rabbi Groner was there. And there was also Rabbi Kaplan, the one who wrote that sefer, Lilmad Echle Espalel, or I mean, it's from his talks that they put it together. His son wrote it. So Rabbi Kaplan was there. It was a Kaplan bar mitzvah. Anyway, so Rabbi Groner told a story And they were Rabbi Kaplan was Farbrengen, Rabbi Groner was Farbrengen. They were being very polite. You sing a niggin, you get a turn, and then another niggin, and he gets a turn. And it says, everyone's very polite. So Rabbi Groner tells a story that a bacher once came into the Rebbe's room in Yechidus. He told the Rebbe that he's depressed. So the Rebbe said something like, walk over to the window, open the window, throw your depression out of the window, because my room can't carry depression. And Rabbi Kaplan heard the story. He was like, oh, wow, what a story. And so they sang a niggin, and then he's talking about it, how incredible, this and that. Anyway, then there's another niggin, then Rabbi Groner starts another story. And Rabbi Kaplan, like, he loses it. He's like, where are you going? Like, we're still, like, the next story is going to erase the previous story. Like, I'll just mention this. When the Frierdiker Rebbe got married, it's also connected to Mitterler Rabbe. So I think he got married on a Friday. Shabbos, Sheva Brachas was by the Rebbe Rashab. And Sunday, they made Sheva Brachas as like a Chanukkas Habayis for the Frierdiker Rebbe. They started whatever the program was. They started Sheva Brachas 2:00 in the afternoon, and they Farbrengen until 5 or 6 the next morning. They took a break for Ma'ariv in the evening, and they Farbrengen till literally to the next morning. Sitting at the table was a chassid who was a student of Rab Pesach Malostovker. Rab Pesach was a mechunich of the Mitterler Rabbe. So the Alter Rebbe asked the Mitterler Rebbe to work with the younger light. And Rab Pesach was one of his mechunachim, one of his trainees. And Rab Pesach had a Talmud, Reb Zalman, who was by the Farbrengen. And when they finished Farbrengen, they're like, oh, let's make a minyan for Shachris. In other words, instead of going to sleep, we'll daven and then. So Reb Zalman felt that somebody was, that someone was impatient. Someone was like, no, let's daven Shachrit, he couldn't. He's like, where are you rushing? Right, after sitting at the table for 16 hours, like, where are you rushing? He says, Reb Pesach told him that he heard from the Mitterler Rebbe that we say in davening, va'avadetem mehera. Va'avadetem means you should destroy. Right? Like we have v'ibadetem eis kol maskiyosom. When you come to the, le'abeid, right? To destroy, to wipe out mehera, any hastiness. Why? Because me'al ha'aretz ha'toiva. It takes you away from doing things, from goodwill. Like when you have a ratzon tov, and then you get impatient. So it takes you away. So the Frierdiker Rebbe said it was incredible to have like Kli Shlishi, like Reb Pesach heard it from the Mitterler Rebbe, and for Zalman, this is like 30, 40 years later, I don't know how many years later, and it was so deeply embedded that it was like instinctive. The moment someone was a little rushed, he felt uncomfortable. And that's really, here we are, we're in New York City. This is like, you can't fall asleep at the light. There's such a drive, but really the space of his beinunus and And Ratzon Tov, the Rebbe Rashab once said, I'm going in, this is like Hasidic Maisis that are a little. Reb Sheil Brook used to say that in the olden days, people used to say Tikkun Chatzos together in shul in a minyan. So every night at midnight, the husband would leave the house, he would go to shul, come back 1 o'clock. Where were you? Tikkun Chatzos. Then he says people started having an ego around it. They're like, what? My husband, Tikkun Chatzos. Anyway, so he says, so they started doing it at home, and then they started doing it in a corner of their bedroom. Then they started doing it in their bed, and slowly, right? So the Rebbe Rashab said in this, he said, people push off the Hizbeinus. This was at a Farbrengen. People push the Hizbeinus instead of thinking by Ashrei, by Halaluka, whatever. They're like, no, Shema. That's, So the first part of davening they do quickly. Then when they come to Shema, they're ready, all right, tomorrow. So they don't do it. And the Rebbe Rashab said at the Farbrengen, they think it's that they don't want. It's that they're unwanted. In other words, it's about being in a rush. Like you're in a rush, you rush through. So when the Rebbe Rashab said it, the Mashpia, Michal Beliner was there, and mamish tears were running down his face. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said that the Bochrim, he didn't look at anyone. Like he wasn't watching. He had a private moment with the Rebbe Rashab. And he said it had such an impact on the Talmidim, so all of us, we have like these moments of a Ratzon Tov. Like today, to talk about not to be in a rush, it's like almost like asking you to have Gili Eliyahu. I mean, it's it's insane, because we just live in such a world that it's and really that's just the greatest gift that we could give to ourselves. Like if we think about the Mitterler Rabbe, that's all the Hasidus of the Mitterler Rabbe. That's what it represents. Like the Maimer doesn't have to end. Like we have a question. Okay, whatever. It's mamish, not negeya. It's like we're learning Hasidus. So every line, every word, it's you say, oh, if that's the case, it's no wonder that he once said a mimer for 18 hours straight, because now it fits in. Like so. Right, but so the Rebbe Rashav's Mamorim, the mimer itself, was an hour and a half. An hour and a half. Right. If you look in Ayim Beis, the Mamorim themselves are quite short. Because they're also very dense, whatever, But the Mitterler Rebbe, a mimer, 30 pages, just.
It wasn't 8 hour.
No, the story was that one of I think the Maharil, they called him the Stender. Right? The Maharil, the Tzemach Tzedek's son, they called him the Stender. So someone asked him, how'd you get the name, the Stender? So he says, my father, one time he was leaning on me when he said a Maimer, it was a long time. He said, how long was it? So it was actually 18 hours. So he supported his grandfather, he supported the Mitterler Rebbe to say a Maimer. But that's completely outside, right? Like none of the Rabbeim had that kind of experience. There wouldn't be any Hasidim who could recall, who could remember. Like it's impossible. Again, these are some fantastic things. I'll just tell you that when the Rebbe Rashab said Ma'amorim, he would look into the eyes of the Frierdiker Rebbe. Okay, the Frierdiker Rebbe would stand across him. They had like a space with tables, and when the Rebbe Rashab passed away, the Frierdiker Rebbe wanted to do the same thing, but he didn't have with whom. So there was a chassid, Avram Baruch Pevsner. It's a tremendous chassid. So the Frierdiker Rebbe asked him if he would be the one. So he stood there. It lasted for a while. I don't remember if it was a few months, exactly how long it was. One time, he said he had a machshava zora, and you'll soon hear. And the Mitterler Rabbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, dismissed him, and so he would close his eyes after that. So what was the machshava zora? The machshava zora was the Frierdiker Rebbe said something, and Avram Baruch thought for a moment that it's from a certain mimer. That what the Frierdiker Rebbe is saying is from a source for what the Frierdiker Rebbe is saying. But I'll just to understand, we have, like recently, someone found a Hanocha that Avram Baruch Pevsner wrote of a mimer of the Rebbe Rashab, and they found the Hanocha after they had the mimer from the Rebbe Rashab himself. You understand? Like just 5 years ago, they found a manuscript from Avram Baruch Pevsner. But we didn't need it anymore because the Rebbe Rashab, we have the mimer from the Rebbe Rashab himself. And when you compare the two, they're almost exactly the same. I can't even describe it to you. The words, the language, the scent, everything. It's almost exactly the same. Avram Baruch Pevsner wrote it after hearing it from the Rebbe. The Rebbe Rashab wrote it, and it's almost a carbon copy. So it's hard for us to imagine. So Al Kolpanim, we have to come back to our world to understand that, thinking about that story from the beginning about the Mitterler Rebbe and the other chassid in Vitebsk. The Mitterler Rebbe was given a responsibility to be mashpia and to be bechanech, the younger light. He took it very, very seriously, even though there were times that after when he spoke mamish. He spoke at the level, he spoke to where people were at. And sometimes afterwards, he was sick, even for a few weeks, just completely, but he gave his whole life to be mechanech. It's not only that was his responsibility, but you have to be able. That's the tachlis, the tachlis of Chassidus. Dira b'tachtonim is not that the Mitterler Rebbe in the clouds could learn Chassidus, but that it reaches the younger light, that all of us are able to absorb it. When we think about the story that the Mitterler Rebbe wrote a mimer for a person, Pikei Achivrim, the booklet for a person that was so far from Yiddishkeit, and he gave them a path, and he wrote it in Yiddish, and anyone could read it. Just such a simple, basic, and you say, wow, the Rebbe is writing to a person that was involved in such things. So the Mitterler Rebbe, it's betachtoinim, like for every person practically, and for us, what I would say, just from personally from myself, is that when all of us have so much information. We've learned so many mamorim. We have so many ideas of Hasidus in our mind. Like we have everything we need to live a life, al pi Chassidus. But we have to you have to juice it a little bit, You have to take out the chayas. Chassidim used to say on the Mishnah, Hashem created the world with 10 utterances, Ba'asara Ma'amoris Nivra Eilam, B'maimer Echad Yochel Lehibaros, with one mimer you could be healthy. Right? Like you don't need 1,000, like one mimer. One mimer, just, again, one keta in davening, one piece, but Yishuv Hadas, calm, not to be stressed, to create that space, and then we feel it, we become changed. That's where the change happens. That's when Hasidim will say, I remember I was sitting by Farbrengen once with Reb Shalom Feldman in Kfar Chabad, an elder Chassid, brilliant, and he said, Hasidus is like breath. He says, you can't breathe on Tuesday for Monday. You have to breathe every day. To eat, you could fast once in a while. And when he said it, I felt it. Because that's where it was for him. And every day he would be mizbainen, every day. And, just incredible. So, and it wasn't so long. There's a reason why the Rebbe had such a reaction when the Mashpir of Shlomo Chaim Kesselman was in Yechidus. The Rebbe wanted to report about every bacher, and the Rebbe asked him about one particular bacher. He told the Rebbe that he thinks Chassidus every day, and the Rebbe literally jumped out of his seat. The Rebbe said, Halavai, everyone would think Chassidus before davening every day. Some say he said an amount of time, but when you find that place of, like, you're going to want to come back to it because it's such a special feeling, and you feel the difference that it makes. You're like, well, of course, this is where I want to be. All the things I learned, I could apply it to do something with it. So, yeah, that's also the Mitterler Rabbe, that we're a society that likes to be very practical. Like everyone thinks in terms of like what works, how to make this work, whatever. Like the Mitterler Rabbe very much had this focus of like practically, how's it going to work? Yeah, L'chaim. Just to share another Maisa, and L'chaim. So this is a Maisa by the Tzemach Tzedek. These characters, Rabbi Hillel, Paritcher, Rabbi Isaac, they were by the Mitterler Rabbe, and then by the Tzemach Tzedek. So there was obviously at the end of the life of the Tzemach Tzedek, there was a tkufa that he asked that no one should come. After his Rebbetzin passed away, Rabbi Hillel was by the Rebbe. Rabbi Hillel was always by the Rebbe. That's where he was at that time of his life. He was one of the Yoshvim in Lubavitch. Rabbi Isaac was a Rav and was in Hummel. One day, Rabbi Isaac decided he wants to go to Lubavitch. He wants to see the Rebbe. He goes out. He looks for a coach, for a balagola to take him. And the balagola say, no, sorry, the Rebbe said you're not allowed to go, so there's no going. So it's all Chassidim. What's he going to do? This is his town. Anyway, there's a guy passing by, a flower merchant, and it was not Lubavitch. And where are you going? Yeah, and he's passing Lubavitch. Oh, get a ride. Rabbi Isaac and his son, they're sitting on the bags of flour, and they get to Lubavitch. They're like covered with a white, with the flour. And they went to the Achsania. They went to where they're going to stay. They sent a message to the children of the Tzemach Tzedek. We're here. We need a change of clothes. So, they sent a change of clothes from the Rebbe's house, the Einiklach. And Rabbi Isaac came. No, Rabbi Isaac Lagabe Rabbi Hillel, he considered himself a nobody. I mean, Rabbi Hillel is a Kaddish, a Rav Tzaddik. I mean, look at the Rabbeim referred to him as a Tzaddik. So Rabbi Isaac wants to hear a mimer. So the says no. So he says, Hillel, go tell the Rebbe that I'm here. I want to hear a mimer. So Rabbi Hillel, he goes to the Rebbe's room, and he's a very bitteldika guy. So he stands by the door, he straightens out his hat and this and his buttons and his gartel and a hair, and he puts his hand, to touch the handle, and then he jumps back and he starts all over again. He rebuttons and he re-straightens and the hat and a few times this happens. So Rabbi Isaac walks over and he moves Rabbi Hillel to the side, and he opens the door, he knocks on the door, he walks in. Hello. Rabbi Isaac, he's a character. And the Poyel, and the Rebbe said a mimer. So, when it comes to Inyanim of Hasidus, we know that in Olam Hazeh, it's the people, the Chevrelite, the extroverts, or whatever you want to call them. They come, hello, and they get it done. They get the menorah, they get the whatever in public spaces there. But really, inside of us, when something is right, you have to go get it. We can't be bitteldik shepselach, little lambs. It's not how it happens. And today there are ways to coach ourselves into taking the right step. You know that it's right. There are things that get in the way, but to help ourselves, it's all out there. We're sitting at a Farbrengen, this is the way we were raised, but somehow there's like a little, we're missing a mini Shlomo Kunyan inside of us that's gonna just no. So just do it. So however we do it, together with a friend or to talk through in ourselves, what is it? What's holding me back? And what all of us see in our own lives, is that when we make a little step, that instead of our nefesh habamis making the decision in our lives, when the nefesh elikis makes the decision, 5 minutes becomes 10, 10 becomes 20. It's and then we see the change slowly, lasting change. So this is the beginning. Here we are, Tes Kislev. And I think that's also the message of the Yartzeit and birthday being on the same day. That by the Mitterler Rabbe, the Ruchnius, that's the way he actually lived. It manifests, his shleimus manifest practically. So all the things that are in our head, in our mind, should come down to our heart. We should try to feel it, and to actually live it. L'chaim, thank you again, and good Yom Tov, everyone.
What did he mean when told everyone the chassid things chassidus? Anything story, minds, what do you mean?
What does it mean to think Hasidus?
Yeah.
A Hasidic message, right? Any Hasidic message. I would say, let's say there's Rabbi Hillel Paricher said a vort. He said, if you don't have, so there are two versions. If you don't have a chush in Negina, you don't have a chush in Chasidus. That was one version. The other version, he says someone who has a chush in Chasidus, someone who has a chush in Negina, has an improved chush in Chasidus. Rabbi Hillel Paricher. So just to what's the meaning? What's a chush? What's a chush? In other words, every thought you can be. I can't say you can't be mizvan in every hayom yom, but every phrase could be thought about, and you could unpack every phrase.
Sometimes you do the variants, and then like the next minute you're like,
Yeah, there
counteract.
was a chassid once, a chassid he davened, whatever, and then he had to go somewhere. You got on a wagon. He's traveling, and he keeps on saying, "Oi, oi, I'm turning over, I'm turning over," and the coachman is like trying to avoid potholes. He feels terrible. He's like, Anyway, when he comes, he says, "Rebbe, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." He's like, "No, I was talking about what's happening inside of me. By davening, I was so connected, and now I'm turning over." He's attracted to the world, So that's why we go back to davening that's why every day we reconnect every day.
I love the concept of breath. You can't skip.
Yeah,
I'll breathe on Tuesday and I'll skip Thursday. Even if it's just that breath, it gives you, the rest of the day you're scrolling, but at least you, you took a breath today.
Listen, in that aspect, it's a big nisayon. Our day is a big nisayon. It's not even so much about the content. It's just the bittul azman, just the way, like we're distracted from ourselves. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Two parts. One is on behalf of all of us, I wanted to thank you so much for spending this Yom Tov with us and inspiring us. I'm not sure if you have this already, but you definitely live by it. So
Ask my wife. Thank you very much.
Letters for
No,
life.
it's beautiful. I'm familiar. Yeah.
You're familiar? Okay. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. We really, really appreciate it. And if it's okay, we take a picture with our speaker.
Really?
Do you mind? You can just stay where you are. You do not have to move. I guess turn around, but
Oh.
1 second.